What's going on, people? And I'm back with another reaction video. Today's video is going to be top 10 fights that absolutely flopped. Just see, let's stop wasting any more time. Let's get into it.
Tools that you have.
Facts.
You can get the general public to believe they're going to witness a fight that will go down in history for years to come. You're going to make more money than you know what to do with, and everyone involved can go out and buy a nice new house. Or a watch. Whatever takes your fancy.
Ooh.
The problem, though, is that you have to make sure said fighters deliver, and there's no way you can control that. Once the cage door is closed, it's up to the competitors to do their thing, and sometimes it just doesn't happen, and you've got a whole lot of mess to try and clear up afterwards. I'm Simon from MMA On Point, and this is 10 hype MMA fights that absolutely flopped. Number 10, Rousey versus McMahon from UFC 170. While Ronda Rousey was a powerhouse in the UFC's women's division, there was always a problem in the sense of how quickly her fights would end. It was amazing seeing her plow through opponents like they were warm butter and she was a kick-ass knife, but it did nothing for the company when they wanted to get fans to believe she could actually be beaten. After all, that kind of idea does sell pay-per-views. This is why UFC 170 was such a disappointment, though. Only 56 days after finishing off Miesha Tate at UFC 170 for a fight. But that's not what happened. For starters, McMahon barely did any promotion for the fight, and when the two squared off, it was the same old story. Ronda did get tagged with a series of punches early on, but with 63 seconds on the clock, Rousey kneed her rival in the liver before finishing her off. It helped Ronda cement herself as an absolute monster, but it never lived up to the hype of being a proper challenge for her. The same old, same old. Number 9, Evans versus Jackson from UFC 114. Even if you weren't a hardened MMA fan back in 2010, you probably knew the names Rashad Evans and Quinton Jackson. Both had carved out a niche for themselves within the sport and have backed it up time and time again in the octagon. This is why after months of going at each other verbally during their time coaching on the 10th season of The Ultimate Fighter, a matchup between them was drooling at the mouth stuff. There was a demand for it as well, as the reality show was doing crazy ratings as Jackson and Evans threw barbs that often bordered on going too far. Plus, they'd both been champions, meaning the credibility here was through the roof. When this all came together in May of that year, though, the truth smacked us all in the face like a right hook. Jackson showed up in poor shape and struggled to make weight, whereas Evans focused on takedowns and just pinning Quinton to the mat for most of this. It was a small flurry from Jackson in the third, but ultimately what was meant to be a violent grudge match turned into nothing more than a boring scrap. Number 8, GSP versus Shields at UFC 129. UFC 129 was massive. Going down on April 30th, 2011, it set records and had 55,000 fans packed into Canada's Rogers Centre. It lived up to all the noise surrounding it too. Nearly every fight leading up to the main event was awesome, especially seeing Rory McDonald and Nate Diaz seemingly try to kill one another. Surely the man of the hour, hometown hero GSP, was going to take this up another step too. Well, no, he did not.
He never
does. He's been destroying everyone for more than 3 years at this point. The Pierre Shields matchup was a bit lopsided, despite UFC's attempts to paint Shields, their poach from Strikeforce, as a man whose chokes were as dangerous as a KO punch. And while that may have been true too, you'd never have known because barely anything happened when the two went at it. GSP clearly didn't want to go to the ground with Shields, so merely annoyed him with a few meagre shots, whereas the challenger failed miserably with his takedown attempts that made him look amateurish. It got worse when frustration set in and Shields raked GSP's face over and over again in a move that seemed to be on the vicious side and raised a lot of eyebrows. When all was said and done, however, this was a massive flop. Fans gave up and left before the final bell, and eventually GSP won the thing.
And I was in Canada too.
It sucked. Number 7, Silva versus Lates from UFC 97. There's a reason Anderson Silva rose up to the top of the UFC ranks. It was mostly thanks to his incredible fighting style and how he would finish fights. That is when he felt like doing so anyway. The very definition of an up-and-down fighter. Silva would often appear to be somewhat unmotivated, and it would come across horrendously when you chewed to watch him go at it. This was never more apparent than at UFC 97 against Thales Lates. Apart from the fact Lates basically lay on his back for the entire duration, Anderson seemed reluctant to go for the killing blow, even though time and time again he did try to encourage his opponent to come out swinging. This never happened though, and instead we essentially had two fighters dancing around each other, refusing to get into the heavy stuff. Afterwards, Silva claimed the reason for this was because the pair were friends, but that seems dubious at best, especially as there's no real evidence for that. Either way, given fans have spent money to watch this on pay-per-view, it was nowhere near the caliber that it really should have been. Number 6, Shamrock versus Gracie 2 from UFC 5. Even years before UFC made it to the big time that it has today, a matchup between Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie was massive. It was two of the best the sport has ever offered during a time when the company was trying to make its mark. It's why the
Their
pair were
third
put in a
fight was
rematch
terrible.
at UFC 5, and why the UFC bet a lot on
Thing
both
gets
sides
kneed
showing
into
the
the
world what
balls.
MMA was all about. Unfortunately, Shamrock and Gracie had other ideas. There's nothing wrong with a well-thought-out ground game attack to try and walk away the victor, but seeing Shamrock almost literally hold Gracie down onto the mat for 30 minutes was beyond dire.
Really?
If you're of the mindset that mixed martial arts were just two guys laying on each other, this was all the evidence you needed.
I think the
Nothing
first
else.
fight,
So boring. It was so bad that when the time
Gracie
limit
submitted
expired,
him,
the
right?
fight was extended by 5 minutes before the exact same thing took place again. Even the timekeeper
went
let it go a
extra
further
5
60
minutes,
seconds, just
extra
hoping
time.
something would happen, but it never did. The whole farce was deemed a draw.
Gee.
Number 5, Shamrock versus Kimbo from Bellator 138. It's easy for us to
tell
sit
me
here and
about it.
criticise what have become known as freak show fights, but let's
It
call a
looked
spade a spade.
fake.
They
I
sell
think that
tickets and
fight was
pay-per-views,
a bit
and that's why
rigged.
they exist. Hence why at Bellator 138, the promotion put Ken Shamrock against Kimbo Slice. Essentially taking a cornerstone of the
He
sport
should
that was long
retire
past his
Shamrock,
prime and
like,
putting him
he's
against
too
someone
old.
that had an almost Carney-like
Like, is he
reputation.
even
The
gonna fight
idea
again?
behind
I don't
this was
want
that
him
the
to.
two would whoop each other so bad and get the internet talking for weeks afterwards, all the while getting a bigger spotlight shone onto Bellator as a promotion. It worked too, as the interest prior was pretty damn big, but it all came crashing down when the
Shamrock
bell rang.
definitely
For
juicing.
starters, Shamrock should have never been back in a cage at this point, and Kimbo was Kimbo. It was kind of fun to watch, but he didn't really have a clue what he was doing. If this had been the whole flow of the fight, it would have still been poor, but maybe at least watchable. What we got was about so strange, many people claimed
Look
it was
how
a
old
fix,
he is.
especially as Shamrock had Kimbo
Shouldn't
in
be
a submission
fighting,
for
you're
at
like
least 30
53.
seconds without getting him to tap out. Kimbo eventually
You could
TKO'd
die.
Ken in the first round, but it left
At your
far too
age,
many
like, you
question
could
marks
die
hanging
with
over
just
it.
one hit.
You bet your ass, that's not what Bellator was hoping for. Number 4, Punk versus Gall from UFC 203.
Yeah.
Hype can be a terrible thing.
The
If
reason
there
why
is none, and a fight turns
this
out
would be a flop because it was all around. This fight was just all around CM Punk, and they just bring in Mickey Gall because he called him out, and this will be the first win of Punk's career ever in fighting, but he didn't perform. He didn't even get one punch in, and he got took down straight away, and it ended in like 2 minutes. And I was really disappointed because I really wanted CM Punk to win, because I watched like his documentary of like his lead up to his training, like from week 1 to all the way to now, like where he was fighting, and I really wanted him to win, and I felt bad when he lost, to be honest, but fair play to Gall anyway. He's fighting soon.
out to be great, a promoter will rue not shouting about it more. You go the opposite route, however, and it turns out to be a bust, well, expect people to let you know. This was CM Punk's UFC debut in a nutshell. There was always going to be tremendous interest around the former WWE man because of the transition he was making. MMA fans wanted to see him get his ass whipped for even daring making the move across from a fake sport.
I didn't want to see him
Whereas
get his
wrestling
ass
fans
whipped.
dared to dream
I
it
wanted
could
him
cause a
to
massive
do well.
upset. In reality, that
At
was
least
never
lose
going to
by a
happen given
decision,
Punk's
like,
limited training
just
time.
stay-
What actually
stand
happened
with
was
the
the
guy
worst
and
case scenario, and then
take some
some.
blows.
Punk was eaten alive by the lifelong trained Mickey Gall. To say it was embarrassing.
sure the
was an
WWE
understatement.
game a lot of
Over in 2
shit.
minutes and 40 seconds
They
of round
actually do-
1,
they actually-
Gall battered Punk
oh my
from
God.
pillar to post before.
If you've never seen him before, in one of the Thursday night SmackDowns or whatever it's called now, they actually reenacted his fight the way he lost. Like, that's so disrespectful. Like, he worked for years, and I know he left because the way he were treating him and all, the way the WWE was treating him, he felt like he wasn't wanted. But do all that. Like, it was like Dolph Ziggler and The Miz. Dolph Ziggler runs in, he gets taken down, and then he's on top of him, hitting him loads of times, and then submits him with a rear naked choke. Like, that's basically making a mockery of CM Punk.
Making him tap out with a choke. Punk barely looked like a pro, which in many ways he wasn't. It was a horrible wake-up call for anyone that had bought in hook, line, and
If he
sinker,
fights
even
again,
though
he has to
really,
fight someone
it was
that's
gonna
making
happen.
their debut.
Number 3,
too.
Lesnar versus Overeem from UFC 141. A bad fight isn't
I don't
always
think it
due to
flopped.
two fighters not giving the fans what they're
I
expecting,
thought
because
Brock Lesnar
sometimes
would have
life comes
won,
along
but-
and ruins it before a single punch is
But
thrown.
Alistair Overeem,
That's
look at the
essentially what
size of
happened
him,
when
he
Brock
is
Lesnar took on Alistair
huge.
Overeem at UFC
Well on the
141.
juice back
Lesnar's
then.
MMA career had been plunged into uncertainty after back-to-back bouts with diverticulitis that would eventually result in surgery.
Diverticulitis.
How he would ever step into the octagon again was anyone's
Brock
guess.
Lesnar looks huge.
Somehow
there.
he did recover enough to take on Overeem, but within seconds
Overeem
it was
was
clear this
huge in
illness
that
had
fight.
more than played its part. Obviously aware of what Brock had been through,
Pre-USADA.
Overeem went straight after the body of Lesnar, and it was simply too much for him to take. was done and dusted before the first round was even over, mostly because a repaired stomach that almost kills you is not a weakness you want exposed. It was a huge shame, as this should have been an absolute war between two massive men, but instead, it was done before you could blink an eye. This is Inoki. There's so much nonsense around what happened between Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki, it's hard to know where to start. But the headline is as follows.
Muhammad
Ali thought it was a worked fight, Inoki didn't. The results were just bizarre. While the greatest boxer to ever live was clearly here for the payday, Japan's most famous pro wrestler had other ideas and decided he was going to kick Ali in the shins really hard over and over again. Ali had no idea this was coming, so got increasingly more upset.
How
And when
did
all
he
was
not
said and
know
done, the
what
crowd
was
had basically
what was
seen
gonna
nothing
happen,
other than
like,
two celebrities kind
did
of having
somebody
a
not
fight.
tell him the
It left a
rules?
sour taste in everyone's mouths, and to this day it's hard to figure out exactly what had been laid out beforehand. There was a ton of hype prior to this crossover, though, so when it ended like this, you couldn't help but feel like you'd just been ripped off.
Hi guys, I'm Tom from MMA On Point, and
for the video, guys, I hope you enjoyed my reaction. I was very surprised of how that list went. I wasn't expecting most of them fights on it, but it was a good video, good list. But I feel like I could have done a better list, to be honest. But however, if you guys enjoyed my reaction, please hit the thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, as always, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.